information with you, probably some of the things you might already know, but I want to go ahead and get a PowerPoint up for you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Hopefully I can get some thumbs up that we see this. Awesome. Okay, I see you, Kai. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I see all thumbs up. All right. Well, my name is Amanda McKinnitz. I'm the Talent Acquisition Manager for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Enterprise Holdings, we operate 3 brands, Enterprise, Alamo, and National. So you've probably seen us in your local neighborhood or at airports. So we just wanted to share a little bit of feedback on what we see from candidates and some thoughts on some things to consider as you guys enter the job market. We're so excited for you and your college, working through all of that. Congratulations. It's been a really rough time. We totally understand that. So hang in there. You are doing so good. And we're so excited to see what awaits for you in the future. So we also have a QR code. I love those two like Kai. So if you want to share your information with us, we can keep you involved in any events that we do and any opportunities that we have. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about resumes. Now, I'm free. You guys can ask any questions you want or throw them in the chat box. We can answer them at the end. But let's talk about resumes. So I think this is really important. When you're creating a resume, I get a lot of questions like, what's the best way to do it? What things should I put in there? And listen, it's really important just to have specific things that you've been able to accomplish. So let's talk about personal information. Make sure you have good contact information at the top. Make sure you have an email address that's professional. Probably one that's just your name is probably best. Be sure if you're using your school email that you check that regularly. So sometimes I suggest utilizing one that might be more, Gmail or Google, and then be sure you're always checking your spam because sometimes the different filters, if we're sending communication from different companies, might go there too. So definitely have a great email address. You can have an objective on your resume. That's completely optional. Either way, I don't necessarily need one when I review resumes. I'm really just looking for experience and education. For Enterprise, we do require a bachelor's degree. So I usually tell candidates it's good to have your education up at the top. So if you're applying for a position and that position requires some version of education, then you want to probably have that towards the top since that's a qualifying. So when we're looking at resumes, it's much quicker for us to go through to make sure you have what qualifies. And then your work experience. So the things that you've been able to do and accomplish, projects you've been able to be a part of, professional organizations that you've joined, honors and awards that you've been able to get, professional skills or maybe certificates that you've been able to also get. And you can always have references. Some companies do prefer that. Enterprise does not, but other companies definitely do. So let's dive into that work experience one, because I get that question a lot. Like, to what extent of information are we supposed to put on there? So definitely have the title of the position that you've had. Sometimes when I see resumes, it'll say, for example, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but I don't know what position. We have several positions here. And so it's really important that you have the title of what your position is, that you have the organization that you're working for, and that you have either the location possibly, so that way, it's California, because that kind of helps us, especially as we have candidates, and a lot of companies can't have candidates that apply all over the US. That way we kind of know more than likely where you are at. Dates of employment are really important. As you're starting to apply for positions, make sure you're updating those. So if it does say present and I ask you, are you still with that organization? Hopefully you say yes. If not, make sure you update that to your end date. So that way we know maybe you're currently with a specific employer, or maybe there's a new employer that should be on your resume. Now in the experience, I usually say have 3 to 5 bullet points after that of things that you have been able to accomplish there. And you want to make sure that they're things that are geared towards some of the qualifications that we're looking for in the job. So if you jump into any job posting for any company, usually they'll kind of list out some things that they're looking for. Try to match some of the things that you've been able to accomplish with some of the things that the position is looking for. That's a really great way to stand out as a candidate on a resume. Okay. And you want to use action words. So things that you've been able to accomplish. So sometimes I see people say, handled money. Now, that might be true. You absolutely probably did handle money, but it's important to probably use action words. That's a little bit different. So maybe you processed transactions and provided, cash handling with your customers, something that's a little more action oriented. So take a quick snapshot of this if you have your camera. These are great words that you would want to put on your resume of things you've been able to do. So I like action words. So achieved, acquired, right? Obtained, negotiated, coordinated. And you want to try to make sure that not every bullet point is the same because not every action is the same. So these are just some great ones that I always go back to. If you're stuck or you have the same one, use the thesaurus. I know you guys are all great at that, writing all your papers, pick another word that's kind of similar to that, just so that way it's not redundant and repetitive, because nothing that you're probably doing is that. You are probably going above and beyond in a lot of areas. So I think there's a lot of things in here. So if you're an accounting major and you want to apply to a CPA position or an accountant position, you can see it says audited, budgeted, calculated, right? So just some action words that are kind of buzz. Take a quick picture of this. I'm so sorry it wasn't up there, but these are the words that I'm talking about that you probably want to use on your resume of things you've been able to do. It really kind of takes that next level in terms of, adding on to what you've done and really, accentuating like what you've been able to accomplish. I'll just give it just a minute here, take some pictures. Okay, well, hopefully we're moving on to the next one. Okay. All right. So we are on specific skills. All right, so hopefully we move to the next one. So this is kind of where you're talking about additional skills. So a lot of people say, well, what other things would I put on a resume? So maybe you have, the Excel suite products. That's really important for those who are in the accounting industry. Maybe you have done speaking roles or been a part of speaking organizations. Maybe you have done some teamwork things, or you've worked in volunteer scenarios and situations, leadership abilities. So make sure you have those listed on there as well. Those are very important. You can put professional skills, professional experience, leadership experience. So you can have a couple of titles in there, especially if you don't have a lot of work experience as a student, that's okay. You're still doing things that are impacting and working as teams. So those are okay to add in there. Leadership. Now for enterprise, for us, we look at 1 year of customer service, sales, leadership, or management. So leadership, a lot of people say, what does that even mean? And that is definitely organizations you're a part of. If you are an athlete, that's fantastic. List those, or you're a captain. You've been a part of fraternities or sororities. Any of those are things that you definitely want to add into there, that you've been able to kind of add into your leadership abilities. And really that just shows us that you've improved on your communication skills, your involvement with volunteer organizations, and then absolutely military. We love our veterans and those who are continuing to serve. So be sure if you have any type of military experience that you absolutely list that on your resume. Am I still moving, Angela? You're like the only person on my screen. Thumbs up. All right, I see you. Okay. So here's kind of an example. I know it's a little hard to see, but I kind of wanted you to see how it's structured now. So now that we talked about some things to put in there, you have your name at the top, and make sure again that your information, I can't stress that enough, because if I can't contact you, then I can't get you in for, an interview and go through the process. So you have the objective listed there. Really important. If you're going to put an objective on there, my goal is to, get this accountant position at your firm, that you change that. I can't tell you how many times I see resumes and they're not updated. So it'll actually say, I'm looking to be, a personal trainer, and you're applying to, an enterprise customer service job. So make sure that as you're uploading them, that you're changing those for the job and customizing it. As you see, the education was next, then experience, and then, leadership activities, honors, any of those that you've been able to accomplish. So definitely keep it to 1 page if you can, 3 paragraphs in terms of cover letters. We don't require a cover letter here at Enterprise, but a lot of companies do. So I usually say 1 page, 3 paragraphs. That's kind of your key right there. The first paragraph should be like why you're interested or how you heard about the position. Your next paragraph is things that you've done that would make you a great candidate for the position. And at the end, recapping and asking that you move forward in the process and be brought in for an interview. So definitely have a close in your cover letter. When sending your resume via email, I get this a lot. Some people just attach it and send it, and it comes from your email, but you didn't, make sure you have like some sort of salutation in there. Hi, Amanda. This is my resume. I'm so excited to be a part of your team, or I'm excited to go through the process, and then have like a little signature with your name and phone number, because we're getting a lot of candidates. If for any reason your email doesn't sync up, then I can't figure out whose resume or what that belongs to. And it's always good to kind of have some warmth and some introduction through emails. hopefully we're still moving. We're on employment applications. Many companies, so and enterprise is no stranger to this as well. We have online applications. A lot of that is legal stuff that we need you to fill out. What I get a lot lately is I already uploaded my resume. Unfortunately, that's not going to take you to the next step in the process, because we do have to have you formalize that information that you're putting on your resume, you're also duplicating on the application, and that you're affirming that that is indeed true. Okay, and that you do want to go a part of the interview process. So again, and so forgive us for asking twice. That's why we like it, because sometimes the application only allows for 1 or 2 previous job experiences, but your resume maybe can have a little bit more than that, or some of the honors or things that you would like us to know. So both of them will actually, I think, make for a better candidate for us to review and really kind of understand your experience and knowledge. So just be sure that you read and follow directions that we're sending you. You know, because remember, this is kind of a part of the process too. For us here at Enterprise, we look at flexibility, we look at ability to, you know, follow directions. And if you're not flexible in filling out also our application, that might be a little lending to one of the competencies that we look for. So make sure you fill it out. I do see this a lot too. So you'll fill it out and you'll just put C resume. That's not going to help me again, because I'm trying to verify that that information is indeed true or correct. And let's say you uploaded a resume that's a little bit older maybe, or has some information not updated. At least I can have accurate information on the application. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're not trying to make you do double work. I'm so sorry for those of you who think that's the case. It just really makes for a better experience for us to move you through the process much faster. Always proofread before submitting. I will definitely say capital letters matter. I get people who apply and they don't even capitalize letters in their name. And you know, that's not good, because any communication we send you is probably going to pre-populate that, and then your name's always going to have a lowercase in it. So make sure you have uppercase, lowercase letters as it's appropriate in your name or in any information that you're putting in there. And if you're no longer interested, that is okay. I understand that our candidates are going to apply to multiple positions. Things are going to change in the process. But remember, things may change in the future, that maybe you do come back or there's an interaction we have. So just make sure you politely decline or let us know that you would like to not go further in the process, and we can select you out. But not responding or sending back anything that might be inappropriate or rude would not be a good thing to do. So be sure, because again, remember, it'll populate into the system and it saves forever. So don't do that. Okay. You know, things that are written in email and text message stay forever. So try to avoid doing that. Just politely decline that you're no longer interested, and we will move to the next candidate. Okay. So there's a lot of different types of interviews. So here at Enterprise, for example, we screen all of our applications and resumes together. And then at that point, we would send you over a link for a phone or a virtual, so like a Zoom interview. And then our second interview, if you move forward, is in person. Now, a lot of companies will do screening interviews over the phone. Then you might do a phone interview. And then at that point, they might offer you the job. There's a lot of companies that do panel interviews. So you might be in person in a panel interview, or you might be in person on a virtual interview with several people that are interviewing you. So it's okay to ask in the process, you know, how that's set up if you don't get any information. Usually we try to tell you this is going to be a Zoom or phone or one-on-one or whatever that might be, so that you can best prepare for that. So let's talk about in person, then we'll talk about kind of virtual, because they're a little different. I'm sure this is no stranger to any of you. Professional image is really important. A lot of people ask me questions like, what if the company's not super professional? I usually say kind of gauge what you're seeing and dress to that, or maybe a little past that, because you know what, being overdressed will not get you the job, but maybe being underdressed or not appropriate might not get you the job, if that makes sense. So if you're able to go a little bit on the other side, I usually think you can do no wrong at that point. So just make sure it's clean and pressed. I usually say try to be free of logos, right, on things that you're wearing. Today I have a shirt on. You might be able to interview with like just a shirt. You might be able to throw a quick little blazer on it, or like a little cardigan. Those always work too. So, and then think conservative, especially on virtual interviews. We're going to talk about that in a second, but you know, making sure that it's appropriate, because obviously camera angles, or when someone's sitting in front of you, you want to be conservative. Many companies, you know, piercings, especially on the face. For enterprise, we don't allow that when we're working in the location. I'm okay if they're in the interview process. I'll probably just let you know that if you were to come on board and that's something that's important to you, that's something that you would have to consider. And just be careful of trends. So there's a lot of things, you know, that may or may not work for a company. The one I always use, and sorry guys, is for the ladies. Like if you have the shorter pants, ankle pants, capri pants, I usually say, let's just not do those until you know for sure that those are appropriate. So just go with regular pants, and that you can't go wrong with that. Thumbs up, Angela, I'm still good. I'm on preparing for a virtual interview. Okay, so let's set the stage. So really important, if you can upload a background, that really helps because anything that's in the background could be distracting. Try to be quiet in the location, but again, we understand we're human too. Things happen. I just had a candidate that had like somebody, you know, the gardener came and was cutting trees outside. Totally get it. You know, we'll work through that together. Have pretty decent lighting so I can at least see you. So open up a window or have a light on. Try to avoid clutter kind of around where you are so I can kind of be able to focus on you. And, you know, test your technology. I jumped on here with Kai to test my technology because I'm not great at it sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't want to work with all the multiple screens. So just make sure you try it out, make sure it's working. You know, again, how you dress and camera positioning. So the camera for me today is right in front. And hopefully, you know, having eye contact is really important. But if your camera is off to the side and you're talking to the camera this way, then make sure you're talking to the camera. But I might have to see you over here. So some people are talking here and the camera is like over here. So be careful on your camera positioning because good eye contact is important. A lot of people find that you know, makes it seem like what you're saying is, you know, truthful, that you're, you know, a good communicator, all of those. So just watch your camera positioning. And if there's an issue, just let the interviewer know that that's the situation that you're in so they understand why that's happening. So preparing for the interview. Things to do, practice. You got to practice. I practiced this presentation before I'm talking with you guys today. And I'm still going to make some hiccups, right? So we understand that. Again, we're all human. We know that. But you want to have, you know, some information about you that's important. We call it the elevator speech. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but you want to have, you know, about 30 seconds, maybe a minute about why, you know, why it is that maybe you applied and why you think you're a good candidate for the position. So it should have some things in that elevator speech. Is I'm really excited about the position here today. I've been preparing for this with the classes I've been taking or the experience that I've had. And I really, you know, I really think I could be a great addition to your team. So something of that nature. Try to arrive early, especially in virtual interviews. If we can take you early, we will, but sometimes they're back to back to back. So just be patient, especially sometimes when I do them back to back on a virtual situation or even in person. I don't want to kick the person out that I'm talking to. So just have a little bit of patience and flexibility that it might be a few minutes after potentially as we close out with another candidate. In person, bring copies of your resume, print them out nicely, especially if there's any updates that you wanted to make, that's totally fine. Making great eye contact, we talked about that. Smile, have a little fun with it. I know it's really hard when you're nervous, but I think smiling has a tendency to just have different endorphins. You're okay, you're getting a little bit more settled in, and you're more likely to get better answers and have a little more confidence. And try to accentuate the positive throughout the interview. Sometimes you'll have questions about difficulties or things that you've had, but at the end of the day, you know, a positive outcome for all of those things is going to be important. And if you're in person, most companies, and us included, are still requiring face masks during the interview. So that is something that I sometimes have to practice because it's really hard, as you guys all know, to go through a bunch of stuff and talk when you have a face mask on. So just kind of practice through that. Try not to be late. If you're going to be late, try to express that to the interviewer. Careful on talking too much. You want to take your cues from the interviewer. Sometimes I'll say, gosh, tell me how you heard about Enterprise. And next thing I know, they've told me their entire resume and it's taken 20 minutes. And I haven't even asked you a question yet. So kind of go with the interviewer on the pace of what the questions are. Definitely chewing gum. I see this even on virtuals. Be careful of that. That's pretty distracting for you and for the interviewer. Slang. This happens a lot Try to avoid slang. And I know it's hard. That's why practicing is important and having someone listen to you. But if you're like, oh yeah, bro, this guy came in and he did that, and I was like, man, don't do that, right? And all of a sudden, what you're saying, it's kind of lost a little bit of meaning. So just be careful on how you're using slang or language that you would probably talk to like your friends, right? You're in an interview, so try to use more appropriate language. For me, I used to practice not using contractions. I know that kind of goes back to like elementary school or middle school, but instead of, I do not, instead of don't, that kind of helps with some of that slang stuff that might come in there. Cell phones. So, obviously if you're on a virtual, that's fine. You have it there, just make sure it's on silent, but try to keep it close because I've had people that we've disconnected or lost it and I've been able to call them. So virtuals, I usually say keep your phone local and, make sure you're paying attention in case we lose connection. In person, probably best to put it away so you don't get distracted. Careful of looking at your watch, especially now that we all have smart watches. And if I was getting a text message and looking down, that could be perceived as not being interested. So just something to think about it. And everyone that you meet in the process, just be careful at your interactions with them. Everybody plays a role in getting candidates through the process. We want everyone to come on board. So just be sure that you're understanding the gatekeeper philosophy and being kind to everyone as you go in the process. So let's talk about researching, because this is really important. People say, like, to what extent do you want us to know about you? Now, I send out a ton of info to my candidates as they're going in the process, and I want you to read through them. But do your research on the company. Go to social media pages. Usually they're posting most current things that are happening in the company. You can get some really great questions through that. Definitely looking for things that are important to you, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a really big part of our platform for a lot of candidates as well. We do have on our website, careers.enterprise.com, we have a blog spot, and our team does a great job of updating information on candidates and things happening. A lot of companies have that too, so definitely take a look at that. Always review the job description. I've had 2 interviews in the last week that at the end of the interview, I said, do you have any questions for me? And they said, well, what exactly is this position? Like, what would I be doing? And while I like that question because you're asking, it's probably better that you already kind of know. So I know I'm going to interact with customers, but what does the day-to-day look like? Like, what would I be doing when I come in? What would I be doing towards the end? So a little bit more specific, because sometimes when you ask that question, I wonder how many companies are you interviewing with and are you really truly interested in our position? So just something to think about. And then always prepare a few questions for the interviewer. I do like it when, you've done a little bit of research and can utilize that. Like, I saw your blog spot. What are your thoughts on that? You can ask about my career path. I've had candidates ask me if they can connect on LinkedIn. I'm okay with that. But I usually like to say, ask a question that'll probably give you an answer to what I'm looking for in a candidate so that you can use that in your close. So maybe it's what qualities do candidates possess that make them really good at this position? Because you want to use that at the end on why I should hire you. So you got to know yourself. And a lot of times, sometimes it's really hard because I know you guys are working so hard in school. It's such a tough environment and climate right now. And so sometimes you're like, I don't even know. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I want. So you probably want to do like a SWOT analysis. Many of you are probably in business classes have been doing something similar to companies and, situations out there. Think about your strengths. What do you like to do? What are you good at? Things that maybe, and, for me, weaknesses are opportunities. Things that you wish you knew a little bit better. And that's okay because most companies will teach you along the way. Things that you've been able to accomplish. I always say, think about those things you're most proud of because you will do such a fantastic job talking about those. In the interview process, those are always great things to bring up. So it's almost like a brag book. And we have that here at Enterprise. We have our team, notes go out or you get a customer compliment. I say print that out, put it in your Enterprise brag book because you can have that as a part of your process when you interview. It's no different for you guys in school. Maybe you get a compliment from, your professor. Maybe somebody's interacted with you in an organization. Maybe you've done some volunteering. So print those out or save those in a folder somewhere so that way when you're getting ready to interview, you have ability to have things to talk about in your brag book. Things that you've been able to accomplish, like goals. For us, we will always ask you goals questions. Most companies probably do about goals that you've had and how you've been able to accomplish them. So think about all those things that you did because it wasn't so easy. It wasn't just you woke up one day and it got accomplished, right? So you did things and steps along the way. So list some of those out. And, how do those transfer, and being sure those are listed on your resume. All right, the interview. Still good, Angela? Okay, good. Sorry, you're the only person on my screen besides Kai.
Okay.
All right, well, you're my special helper today. All right, so let's talk about the interview, because it's really important that you make a good impression, and really for you too. I never want a candidate to walk away from an interview feeling bad. That's not good. I want you to feel good, especially when there's so many unknowns going out there in the world. I at least want your interaction with us to be great. So presentation is everything, looking the part, feeling the part, smiling, and think about, your verbal and nonverbal communication. You can't see all of it, but I do communicate with my hands quite frequently. So it's hard in a virtual for people to see all of that, but in person, you would see that process, and that's okay. How you would present things, utilizing the right vocabulary, and try to avoid talking about personal information. So if you get that question, tell me about yourself. Sometimes people will tell me their age, where they live, what they like to do for fun, their kids' names. Try to avoid all of that. It's not that I don't want to know that information, because I do care about you as a person. But in the interview process, we want to stick to the competencies. We want to stick to like what you've been able to accomplish, and leave all of that until later when you get the job, and we can talk about, things that you enjoy doing. So try to avoid personal information. So stay with things that you've been able to accomplish as it relates to the job. Turning negatives into positives. This is really important. This is my favorite thing that I try to work on, even for me. I do interviews all day long, and it's still hard for me to interview. Be on the lookout for the way that you phrase things. So we look for customer service oriented people here at Enterprise. So if I ask you a question about, tell me about a time that you had an upset customer, and what you were able to do to make something right for them. And during your answer, you say, well, customers, they always complain. Oh, they're just so hard to deal with. Right there, I'm thinking your attitude towards customers might not be what we're looking for. So while that might be true, right, or it might be hard some days, you want to make sure that, you're thinking about it in terms of, I get the opportunity every day to make it right for customers. Yes, they're not always happy. We're not perfect, but we do our best to make it right for them. This is the customer situation I had and what I was able to do. So turning, those negative questions, or if we asked an adversity question, when's the time that you got feedback from a supervisor or a professor and it was really hard to take? How did you, take that information and get better? Careful on how you phrase those, like, oh, the professor wasn't really right. I don't know why he told me that, but next time I made sure I did it. Some of that stuff is probably better left unsaid. And this is the feedback I got, and here's what I did to do better. So just be careful as you're phrasing. I always talk about positive framing because I do think at the end of the day, it'll start to change a little bit of who you are, and you'll start to get a little bit better at looking at the positives. Always have that, opportunity thought in there. It's always an opportunity for you. I know you guys are working on so much, but if it doesn't go right, and that happens for me quite frequently, I feel like sometimes I joke I'm a 2x4 learner. So I got to get kind of knocked down to try to get back up. Those are opportunities. It's okay. And you know what? That makes sometimes for great employees that they're able to overcome adversity and get better. So definitely think about those as you move forward, that, that could really help you in the workplace. So behavioral interviewing. So for Enterprise, we use behavioral interviewing. So you've heard me say a few questions already, but really we're going to ask you about a time in the past that predicts your ability to do that in the future. And so a lot of them will be, tell me about a time, when in the past have you been able to accomplish this? When have you been a part of a team and you've been able to lead them to success? So you will hear those. A lot of companies use behavioral interviewing, which is different than situational interviewing. Situational means, hypothetically speaking, if I put you in that scenario, what would you do? We want to know when you've actually done it, accomplished it, and how you felt about it. So we use behavioral interviewing. So we're looking for competencies. For us, we look for those who have results driven, who have great customer service skills, communication, have some leadership qualities, and at the end of the day can be persuasive, since we are a sales and customer service position. So sometimes that's a question you could ask is, what competencies are you looking for? Or sometimes in the job posting, it'll be listed. And so kind of how those questions are going to be geared And so definitely you can go on to Google and look up behavioral interviewing, grab a couple of those questions to practice. That's why having a brag book is really important, because you can just pull up your brag book and go customer service. When's the time I was really proud of myself, and kind of go through those. So that kind of helps out in the behavioral interviewing scenario. So can you tell me about a time when you held a leadership position? How did you motivate? Can you tell me about a time that you had to handle a challenging customer? Now, you might get follow-up questions from that, but because you're already in, answering that, you should be able to answer those questions. So if I say, gosh, how did the customer feel about it? Or how did you feel about it? At the end of the day, would you do things differently? So those will be follow-up questions you get in there, but it'll be related to the situation that you're sharing. So you should be able to answer those questions and feel good about it. So think about the totality of the situation that you're bringing up. Avoid saying things like I'm the best in sales, or people love me because I have a great personality, because a lot of those are really just general overviews that you're giving. It's much better to give, this is what I've done and how I've been able to demonstrate why I'm best in sales. I was able to do this with customers and that put me as number one. I'm okay with having that confidence and saying, this is what I've done. That is fantastic. But be careful that you don't have anything to back it up with, if that makes sense. So I use the STAR method. And actually, sometimes if you interview with me and it was okay, I might give you some feedback to utilize the STAR method moving forward, because my job is to get people hired. And I think a lot of us recruiters would tell you that. Just think about it. We want people to be hired. That is what we do. Our job is not to decline people all day long. I don't look at it that way. So I always try to help and prep. And so asking for feedback from recruiters, I think that's totally fine. Anything that we can all get better, right? So the STAR method, it's called situation, task, action, result. Many of you probably heard that in college. It's no different here when you're interviewing. What was the situation that you encountered? So if we're using the customer scenario, why was the customer upset? What did they want you to do? Maybe they wanted you to refund the item, but they were past the 90 days. So what did you do as a result of that? Maybe you did have to talk to a manager. Maybe you were able to make the exception for them. And then at the end of the day, how did you and the customer feel about it? So what was the end result? So try to utilize the STAR method. Now, sometimes when candidates are answering questions, they might do it a little out of sort. So we might get the ATSR. A good recruiter can move through those, but don't leave them off, because if we only get the situation, task, and action, you might hear me say, well, what happened? Like, how did the customer feel about it? That's our job, to kind of help you get that result answer so that it's a totality question and we're able to evaluate it. So just think about that when you're answering questions. That way, one, it keeps it to a relatively minimum in terms of what you're saying, and you're able to give a really specific answer. And it's okay if you have to pause. It's okay if you have to think. It's okay if you need me to rephrase the question. I want you to answer the question. So whatever you need from me to give your best answer, I am all for it. And many of us recruiters are the exact same way. So don't be afraid. And at the end of the day, make sure it's a positive result. So in that scenario with the customer, if I said, gosh, what happened with the customer? And you said, oh, they still left unhappy, then that question is probably going to be a reason for passing. Because at the end of the day, you didn't, help the customer. My question was, when did you help the customer to, their satisfaction, right? So be sure you understand the question and you can answer that question. Now, if I said maybe one where you weren't able to help them, but what did you do in the future to do better? That might be a good answer. So make sure you listen to the question, and maybe you even have to have it repeated. So that way you can ensure you do have a positive result. Be prepared with the questions like we talked about. So usually I'll ask questions, and then at that point, I'll let the candidate ask me any questions they have. And then that is a time for you to ask me questions to gauge your close. So you want to be gathering information from me on what would make you the best candidate. And I always say, ask for the job, always ask for the job, virtually, phone, in person. Make sure that you understand the position and that you think that this is something that, you can add value to. And it could be something as simple as, gosh, Amanda, I've really enjoyed talking to you today. I know you said it's important that, our your candidates have customer service experience. I have that. I like working with customers. I think I'm good at it, as you've been able to hear in some of my examples. I would really love to move forward in the process and be given a chance to move to the final interview or be made an offer for the position. So make sure you have something in there that really reaffirms that you know you have what it takes for this position. And if you maybe fumbled in the interview, I might go back and ask you another question, or at least I know at the end of the day, you understood the job and you know that you can actually do the job. So be bold. If you think during the interview, you get that feeling like, oh, I'm not sure it's going so well, it's okay to ask if there's any concerns. I do sometimes get that quite frequently. You want to kind of gauge the interview. If things are going well, you've been able to answer the questions and you get that feeling like, oh, this is going well. You want to be able to like continue forward. You don't have to ask me that question. I think that's where you go straight to the close. That's only if you feel like there was times that you bumbled, or maybe they asked you questions and you weren't able to answer it. You can always say, are there any concerns that you might have regarding my ability to do the position? Again, I like to usually use positive. So are there anything that you would like me to elaborate on that can show I can do the position? That's more of my favorite because you're assuming the positive. And again, ask for the next steps in the process. But let's say you and I are talking about the position and you're like, this is not for me. That is okay. You are entitled to be interviewing us just like we're interviewing you. So just be gracious and decline. Gosh, you know what, Amanda, after talking about it, I'm not sure that's what I'm looking for long-term. I think I'd like to select out at this time, or I'm not quite interested to move forward, but maybe in the future, if that would be okay. And that is totally fine, because you know what, at the end of the day, I want you to find something you love to do and you're passionate about. So just gracefully decline out and thank people for their time. Now that's really important. You can do it a few ways. You can email. I'm usually a very big proponent of, after I interact with anyone, to be sure I thank them for their time. Time is precious, as you know that. So however way you can do that. Usually we don't send it by mail anymore, especially if it'll take a few days. So you're welcome to send, an email, or sometimes I do text chatting with candidates. I'm totally fine with that too. But you should thank people for their time or that you've met along the way that have helped you through the process. After the interview, we talked about the thank you note. You could follow up with me by phone, especially if there's a lot of candidates in for the position. That might be a way to ensure that you're still interested and get your name in the forefront. That definitely might be something to consider. And let's say that you don't get the interview. Maybe at that point, you can ask for feedback. And I get that a lot, and I'm happy to tell people that. We do allow our candidates, if we don't go with them at this time, to interview in 6 months after they get additional experience. A lot of companies might be that way too. And so that's a good way to get some feedback on how to get better and come back and try again, because that's okay. So let's talk about getting an offer. So maybe you get an offer or 2 or 3. My goodness, so many of you are such wonderful, in the process, in there, all these different things. What do I do? So just know your value. Some companies will allow you to negotiate salary. Some will tell you that it's not negotiable. And think about what it is that you want to do long term. Does this have a career path? Does it not? Is this something that you need as a skill to build towards that career that you want in the future? Maybe it is. And prioritize what's important to you. And make sure that you're communicating. So maybe you do get an offer, and we have candidates who think about that. Maybe during thinking about it, you want to come back to me and ask me some more questions. I'm fine with that. Let's make sure it's the right thing for you. And have a realistic expectation, in terms of, when you'll make that decision. So not 2 or 3 weeks down the pipeline, but usually within 24, 48 hours. And at that point, we can either move on to other candidates or hopefully get you in the process. So just some additional thoughts. Kai and her team are fantastic. I know it's been really hard in the virtual realm, not always seeing a lot of people, but they have so many resources, and they are there for you to help you through this process, to help you practice, to review your resume, to give you, maybe you don't know what you're doing and you're unsure where to start. They can kind of ask you questions, and just that process of going back and forth, maybe you figure out what it is you're looking for. Practice, practice, practice. I can't explain that enough. Whether that's with yourself, whether that's taping yourself and reviewing it, whether that's having, different things around you so that you're able to say, oh gosh, here, okay, I got my customer service example. Okay, I got this example. Let me think about what else I need. Networking with potential employers, that's really important. So being a part of all of the Career Center, things that they put out there, going to spotlights on employers, signing up for group sessions. I know it's really hard with everything else you have going on, but there's a lot of things out there, and just taking 20-30 minutes to figure out, is that for you or maybe not? I think that's going to help you a lot, especially when you're learning in your classes. You'll be able to kind of gear towards that. Be sure that that you're prepared for interviews. If you're not sure how to prepare, hopefully today helped you a little bit with that. You are always welcome to, I always get questions like, how should I prepare from a candidate? I'm okay with that. I'd rather get you prepared. Again, I'm trying to get you hired. So that's okay. If you're having issues, difficulties, just let us know. We can work through that, especially with the day of COVID. So if you think you're not feeling well, please pick another day for an interview, whether it's in person or virtually. I want you to be your best version of yourself, and that's okay. And don't ghost. That's really going to be tough, especially if you want to come back later in the interview process. There's a lot of candidates, and we want to be fair to everybody. Again, if it's not for you, just politely decline and move on to the next one. So next up, really important, you saw Kai's message today to sign in with the Career Center. We are going to be doing some mock interviews, so they will be sending out information to you on how you can sign up for those. We will be back in play on December 1st to help you through those, whether you want to come to Enterprise or anyone out, any field or genre out there. I'm happy to kind of listen to your elevator speech, listen to, your behavioral interviewing, answers, and help you through that. So we can kind of give you some feedback. And, again, we're just trying to help you be the best version of you. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that with the Career Center and any other future events they have. What a wonderful team that you have supporting you. So we're just really grateful we've been able to be a part of that as well. Again, this is a career path. This is something I send out to candidates, so I wanted to share with you. So this would be an example of something that you could ask questions on. We hire for our management trainee position. That's a completed bachelor's degree, and it does have a pathway. So this would be questions you could ask employers is, what's the pathway? What's the timeline? So for us, it's about 10 to 12 months to get your first promotion and pay raise, and hopefully within 12 to 18 months in an assistant manager role. So there's absolutely a pathway here at Enterprise. Those are questions you would ask employers on what's the pathway. Some positions don't have pathways. That's okay. Maybe that's what you're looking for. But if you do want that continued growth and challenges, find a company that has a career path. So that way, at least where you're going. And here at Enterprise, I've been with Enterprise almost 20 years. I can't believe it. The time has flown by. And what's great is I started as a management trainee, but as I've grown, I've moved into different pieces of the business, and I was an HR manager for several years, and now I'm on the recruiting side. So I didn't have to leave this company. I could stay here. So find companies that have that kind of opportunity, because maybe you find out something you're good at or that you love to do, and you don't want to go elsewhere. You want to stay there. So that's just another thing to look for when you're doing your research for companies. Again, if you want to have any information from us, please click our QR code. Share your information with us. We do similar events like this, or we'll talk about women in business or LGBTQ and how we support that and be an ally. So we have a lot of different focus coffee chats that we do, including the ones we do here with UCR. So really, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to all of you today. Hopefully my PowerPoint moved. Angela, you're amazing. Thank you for your help today. Kai, you're wonderful. So at this time, I'd love to take any questions that you have. And I'll try to pull up the chat box. I don't know if you saw any in there, Kai.